snack Blake, please.
I mean, he's not the same. I wonder if this is an Ann call.
Her stuff is there. She's right here.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the first, won't be the last.
Where's 508?
Right?
I don't know.
Calling the meeting to order at 6:06. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Ferndale Public Schools Board of Education held on Monday, February 9th. It's a special meeting being recorded for broadcast on the district's YouTube channel. All meetings in the Ferndale schools are held in public in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. Printed documents discussed in tonight's meeting are available to the public on request, with the exception of any information protected by student or employee privacy rights. Boarding meeting information is posted on our website at ferndaleschools.org. If you do not have internet access and need information, please contact the board offices at 248-586-8652 by Thursday of the week prior to the meeting, and district staff will do their best to work with you. Ms. Shepard, may we have a roll call, please?
Here.
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 Thank you.
Does any board member have any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, without objection, the agenda is approved. We'll move to public comment. Just a quick review on public comment. This is the time for public participation. We only have one agenda item, so but comment may be on any item, whether it's on the agenda or not. Just a few quick guidelines. We have contact sheets that we request that you fill out. But if you don't wish to do so in writing, please identify yourself when you step up to the podium. And if you need a response, provide contact information to one of our administrators after the meeting. I'll call on people who have completed comment sheets first. Also, for anybody who hasn't completed a comment, when I get through the comment sheet, when I get through the list, just line up at the podium. And if there's a line there, we'll continue to take comments for 30 minutes. If, in the event that the number of people wishing to comment requires longer than 30 minutes, then public comment will be cut off after 30 minutes, and then time will be added to the end of the meeting so that everyone who wants a chance to speak may get that chance. Anyone who wishes to speak as a representative of a group, union, or so forth, we encourage that. And complaints about any staff should be made outside of board meetings and should follow the applicable board policy. And we just ask that we continue our tradition of speaking to each other with civility. So with that, the first comment sheet that I have is Scott Collins. So I ask Mr. Collins to come up to the podium.
Good evening, everybody. I've seen a lot of you the last times I've been here have been for track and field, and most of the people that are here, especially the busing, know me because they transport all my runners. I wanted to mention a few things that have come to mind over the last few days about outsourcing some of the people that are potentially going to be outsourced. And some of the things that I want to think about are, there are a handful of people that are closest to our kids. And the most important thing that's in front of us are our kids. Those people are our teachers, our busing staff, our secretarial staff, and our custodial staff. When there's a problem going on in our building, when I have a concern about a student, oftentimes I'll turn to our custodial staff or our secretarial staff and ask, hey, do you know anything about this? And they'll say, well, yeah, actually I do. Because the students talk and they're around listening. And it's important to understand that because those custodians, they're integral to our school as a family. And if we don't have them there, in the family state that we have them right now, if they're transient or if they're working for another company, then we lose that needed part of our family as a neighborhood school system. I mean, we're not some giant 4,000, 5,000, 25,000 person school system. We're a small school, and we need to remain a family of employees. There's a lot of safety factors that come into this as well. One of those being a person who's being outsourced isn't necessarily going to be keeping track of keys. If they decide to leave and go to a different job the next day, what happens to the key? If you have quality of work issues, for example, Rochester Public Schools recently outsourced their staff, their custodial staff. My wife works there. She teaches second grade. And she said a lot of stuff's starting to come up missing. She doesn't know the name of a single custodian at her school. Before that, she knew everyone, every single one. If there was ever a problem, she knew exactly who to call, and they were there just like that. Now she doesn't know anybody. I'm not saying that the people that would be brought in an outsourced situation aren't good people. I believe in the goodness of people, genuinely. But I'm concerned that the people that we've got that we already know are good might be gone to save some money. And I think it's a hard choice to make. I know that money is important, but please, I beg of you guys, I ask of you, I don't beg. I ask of you guys, please look at the long-term effects of what could potentially happen if we outsource these staff members, these treasured staff members, these family members in our district, versus the short-term savings of having a contract with an outside company that could potentially, in a few years, change. That's all I have to say, and thank you very, very much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope you guys make the best decision for our entire staff and most of all for our students and their families.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Next, I'd like to call up Jesse Inklin.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for your time and consideration. I'll be brief as I can. John F. Kennedy was the 35th President of the United States. During the 1,000 days he served as America's leader, he accomplished many things. None was more important than the belief that Americans would rise to meet the challenges of the new century and be successful. Kennedy was important to the people of Ferndale. His legacy is imprinted on our school district, from buildings to scholarships. In life and death, he was a profile in courage. Today, we are faced with challenges that threaten those who are most valued and vulnerable, our children. Kennedy said our progress as a nation can be no swifter than our progress in education. The human mind is our fundamental resource. If we deprive our students from having contact with a part of our community that cares about their welfare, we impede their progress. Custodians and maintenance are our community. Today, we ask our leadership not to let short-term desire trump the mandates of the common good. Communities that invest in themselves model the kind of behavior we want to develop in our students. Keeping our custodians and maintenance as a part of the Ferndale Public Schools is essential. To quote Kennedy, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. We must not travel the slippery slope which falsely promises us security if we only abandon our principles and our colleagues. Privatization is a slippery slope. Martin E. Miller once observed, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. But then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." I choose now to rise a proud unionist to speak for my colleagues in education. Think long-term. Please keep our community whole. I thank you.
Next, I'd like to call up Lori Johnson, please.
Hello.
Evening.
I'm Lori Johnson. John Harcroft, our president, wanted me to let you know that he would have been here, but unfortunately he's in the hospital. I will be speaking to you on behalf of our union. We would like to point out a few facts that perhaps Mr. Pruitt may not be aware of since he hasn't been here that long. Also, we would like to make sure that all of you have all the necessary information so you can make an informed decision before voting on this difficult topic of accepting bids for the privatization of the custodial and maintenance groups. At the request of this board and the Ferndale administration, to be made whole in July of 2015. If this passes, we are afraid the members this vote would affect may never recoup what they gave in good faith, as it was stated to us, to invest in the future of Ferndale schools. During these concessions, some of these employees went from earning as much as $17.32 an hour with full medical benefits for their families and themselves, to earning $10.50 per hour with medical coverage for only the employee. Again, this was done in good faith with the promise of being able to keep their job intact. 75% of the employees this vote will affect are the same employees now earning $10.50 per hour with very limited benefits. We may not know what the answer is to your budget problems, but what we do know is this. The board and the Ferndale administration, past and present, continuously look at the ASME members in an attempt to find ways of fixing the budget. With all concessions that have been made and the budget still seemingly not getting to where you need it, clearly you may need to look in other places other than ASME to help mend the budget and stop constantly just looking at our union members. We also know the groups you are requesting to put the bids out for would not generate enough capital to help the budget if privatized. And here are a few other points we ask you to keep in mind. The district will lose control of cost containment for all supplies if privatized. The district will no longer be able to control how much is spent on any supplies for both custodial and maintenance needs. The custodians are in the buildings every day, all day with the students, and after they have left. They are there for all after-school functions and anytime there are students in the building for any reason. They all know the majority of the students by name, as the students know them. They have a personal vested interest in the students at Ferndale schools. Some of them have been here for over 20 years, some of them closer to 30 years. The maintenance department is in and out of the buildings on a daily basis. All of our maintenance men are longtime district employees also. The students know them by sight as people who belong in the buildings. At the same time, the maintenance men know the students by sight, making it a very comfortable situation for everyone. With privatization, we are opening our doors for, as we refer to it with the students, stranger danger. The personal care given by our staff will disappear, and you will no doubt have different people in and out of the buildings on a daily basis, making it difficult to determine who belongs there and who does not. For all of this, we are requesting that you think long and hard about the facts that were presented to you before you make a decision, and then vote no to any form of privatization. Thank you.
Next, excuse me, next is Mark Riasti.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Mark Riasti. I'm a staff member at Ferndale High School and a member of the FEA. In addition to the concerns already expressed about the loss of valued members of our community and the concessions already made by ASME in good faith, I would like to express concern about the potential costs that this might end up, the potential that this might end up costing the district in the long run. There have been studies, including one by Professor Daphne Greenwood of the University of Colorado entitled The Decision to Contract Out, which was done last year, 2014. And these point out that the savings from privatizing, previously public entities often diminish very rapidly over the time of the contract, and that there are often hidden costs, which was just referred to in terms of supplies that are not necessarily embedded into a contract, and that these kinds of things can cost more in the long run, which is why over half of these contracts are usually terminated by the government entity that initiates the RFP in the first place. I would also like to say that this is a concern that our union heard from board members who were running for office in 2012 echo these statements, that these kinds of privatization methods do not end up saving in the long run, and that while there could be short-term savings, they could end up being more costly in the long run. And I think this is a district that needs to be looking at long-term solutions right now. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you hearing me out. Thank you.
Next is Paula Cardelli.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, friends. And you are my friends. We've been all here together for a long time. As you know, I've been here since I student taught in 1976 and was hired in 1979. So I've been here a long time. Board, you ran on a platform a couple years ago on community, transparency, and trust. Those are the tenets. Community, transparency, and trust. Last year, we went through a huge community event looking at strategic planning. Involved lots of people, everybody here. Our community at large, and our community here. Came up with a strategic plan. Transparency. Disappeared. That plan. Not too many people in the community know that. Where's the trust? Where's the trust? The people here have invested many, many years and a lot of time for our community. Our community as employees, our community of us that almost all of us live here, and a sense of trust. The very tenets that this board has run on and claimed to be important. We all agreed to take concessions last year and to have a sense of community, to support each other, to trust each other. We all had each other's back. It hurt all of us, but we said we are stronger together than we are divided. Community, transparency, and trust. We were told we'd be made whole. It was a short-term issue. It's not what we're hearing now. Community, transparency. None of us knew about this meeting tonight until Saturday. Trust. In closing, we used to have a logo that were the eagles and their eaglets. And those eagles and eaglets meant the community at large, bringing our children here. I live in the community as well, all being here. That meant the community here, all of us together, mentoring the senior people, senior staff, mentoring the younger staff. And I'm afraid all that's left now are the feathers. Thank you.
Next is Charlie Morgan.
Good evening. Thanks for your time this evening. A lot of the points I was going to make have already been made. There's a couple of things that I do want to say. That if you are going to cut the people who are so trusted and valued in terms of their performance, then you should continue to bargain in good faith with their union and not come up with some off-the-cuff type decision to cut everybody. Everyone who works for this district should be held accountable for their performance. If you have those who are not doing their job, then you should address those people accordingly. Do not make the entire staff suffer for those who you think are not doing the job. The other thing that's going to happen here if you do privatize is you're going to lose the pride of performance. I know a lot of these people. We're not just talking about paper and pencils and equipment and so forth. We're talking about people's lives, and you need to consider and continue to bargain with them accordingly. I thank you for your time.
Those are all the comment sheets that I... All right, sure.
Go to the microphone.
That way it'll be recorded.
I think I can speak loud enough, but I had one question. If it's nothing but a token effort, is there any discussion about our administrators taking a cut? Even if it's a token amount? In solidarity to all these people who have made sacrifices and so forth.
Hopefully we'll get that, well, I'm sure that answers to these questions will come up during the deliberation and presentation. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Mr. Tellisford.
Good evening. My name is Maurice Tellisford. I'm the president of the Ferndale Education Association. I would also like to echo many of the comments that have been made today. We really view this entertaining of a request for proposals as a way to breaking trust, not just with the ASME union, but also all of the unions. We all went into last year and agreed to invest, as many of you put it, in the district with the hope that we would see rewards or returns of the work or the sacrifice that we were making in the future. And this seems like you're cutting a group out from being able to participate in that success. Also, the unions and the association leaders meet with the superintendent and the HR department on a monthly basis. We've been doing this to establish trust, to rebuild trust that had been damaged in the past, and to have a heads up on what's coming in the board meetings and in the district. We didn't hear about this until Saturday, and to me it's damaging to our relationship for the leaders of the associations who are supposed to be privy to information that could have this type of impact on the district to not find out about this until 2 days ago. So that is very concerning. The last thing I'll say is that members have voiced to me how valuable the custodians and the maintenance crews are in their buildings, how they've been going above and beyond, doing more with less for the last few years, and how if we lose them, we get someone who's just working to get a paycheck, just working by the hour. When you need something extra, you don't have someone to go to. You don't have someone who has the institutional knowledge to get stuff done that you need done in a timely manner. And it ultimately comes back to affect the kids in a negative way, because we can't be as effective as we are because we don't have the adequate support from the maintenance and custodians. So I strongly urge you to honor the commitment you made to all of the associations last year and do away with this consideration. Let's give the superintendent and the assistant superintendent time for their plan to take effect. And we believe it is a good plan and that this district is on a path to success in boosting enrollment and financially stabilizing itself. But let's give that plan time to play out before we consider disregarding one of our associations. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay. Sure. And if anyone else wishes to speak, just line up. And once the line is gone, we'll close public comment.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Brooke Krzelski-Jones. I'm a parent in the district, a community member, but also I work here. I just started working in this building in December, and so I want to take a little different perspective on it as a parent. Miss Lori is my children's bus driver and has been for years. And there was a situation that happened before Christmas where my kindergarten daughter, I go to pick her up, she's crying. When I go, she can't get off the bus, she's crying. She had lost a snow globe that she had made that day at kindergarten for their Christmas celebration. So Miss Lori says, I'll look for it. If I find it, I'll save it for you when you come back to school. Guess what shows up at our house a few minutes later? A school bus. A school bus shows up at our house when my daughter is still crying that she can't find the snow globe. Miss Lori found our address, must have called the bus depot to get our address to bring it to our house. How special was that? That is not going to happen when districts outsource things. I was a teacher in Hamtramck for over 9 years. We just privatized janitorial maintenance, not maintenance, but the custodians and busing. It was awful to go through as a staff member. I don't want to have to go through that again in this wonderful community that we live in that is 2.2 miles, very similar to the community of Hamtramck. It broke the community, and I don't think any of us want that to happen to our children. I'm speaking as a parent and a community member and a staff member. So think about what you're doing to the littlest ones, from my kindergartner that's crying that people help, to the kids that are leaving, and to the staff that work for the community. Thank you.
Hi, Michelle Sabula, Ferndale Association of Educational Secretaries. Secretary. I guess I just wanted for our union to be heard, and basically everything has pretty much already been said this evening. Maurice pretty much covered the union perspective. We've been through a lot this past couple of years, and I guess the personal and emotional comment that I would like to make is I want you all to know how utterly sad and disappointed I am to be standing here right now.
Patty Collins, President of the Secretaries. I really can't say too much more because everything that I would say has already been said. I am a grandmother in the district. I live in the district and I work in the district. I've been here for 22 years. And I'm very sad to hear this. My granddaughter, who attends Kennedy, knows Mr. Dan by name, knows that if she has an issue, she can go to him. She knows that he's safe. And when we remove those kind of people from our children's lives, they no longer have that safety feeling. And we don't know what any of these children on any given day have been through in their home life. And they need to have that security. They need to be able to hold on to that. So I really request that you really think hard about this. And once this starts going, like they said, the slippery slope, we could be next. And there's no guarantee that that won't happen. But I'm very close with the AFSCME group because I take care of all their sick days, vacation days, their call-ins, and they're a great group of people. Sure, people mess up once in a while. We all do. We all have made mistakes. We all haven't lived up to our potential. So we have all taken cuts for this district, and I think we should be given the chance to make good on that.
Sorry if I say one more thing. Yeah. I know I was up once already.
If you can say it in the mic so we make sure that it's heard for everyone at home.
Briefly, and then.
Yeah. I apologize. My name is Scott Collins. I work at UHS. I've never been up here talking like this, so it's my mistake. You're in charge of human resources. The first part of that being human. Human is a lot more than just a simple resource like a pen or a pencil. But we've talked, you and I have talked, chewed the fat about Lee Averill, all kinds of stuff. We've talked about how, and I've talked to my administrators about how it's so important to say, instead of saying, well, this is what's wrong, this is what's, this is the bad stuff, this is the bad stuff. Instead, come at it from the perspective of, this is what's good. this is what we could do to improve things. This is how we can, this is a solution instead of a problem. Most of the districts around us have outsourced, right? Isn't that a selling point for our district? Well, we have all these people internally. These good people that are taking care of our kids that we can trust, that we know are there for our kids. That's the selling point. I mean, if my kid, I live in Clawson right now, and my kid's going to go to Clawson Public Schools. But if Clawson Public Schools gets absorbed or something, which it might, my kid's not going to Rochester, where my wife works. She teaches second grade at Longmeadow. Unbelievable district, right? One of the best in the state. My kid's coming to Ferndale. I want him to come to Ferndale because I want him to know what a real district's like, with real people, with people that care about each other. That's the selling point. If I'm willing to bring my kid to Ferndale, that's the selling point. And I hope all of you really kind of keep that in mind, that this is a district that's based on selling what's best for our kids, not selling what's best for our bottom dollar. We're not going to save money off outsourcing in the long run, I don't think. We're going to save money bringing kids in because we've got solidarity with our staff and with our administration and with our board. We've got trust and openness. And we've got what other districts don't have. We have everybody on board in one single boat. Sink or swim, sink or float rather. We've got everybody on board in one boat, ready to bring their kid into adulthood, into life, and into doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Thanks again.
So seeing no one else at the podium?
There's one more.
One more? So I'm going to, unless people line up, I'm going to close public comment after this.
Okay, I'm Roberta Lusk. I teach at Kennedy School. And I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to go to OTEC out in Pontiac. And the gentleman there was speaking about how many kids can't actually make it to OTEC because their districts don't provide buses. And he made a huge comment about Ferndale. We're talking about how we have to talk about Ferndale in positive note. And he was speaking about Ferndale in such a way, he was like, I don't know what they do there, but somebody makes sure that the bus that comes from Ferndale stops along the way up Woodward and picks up kids from Berkeley and Birmingham and all those other, I am not a public speaker. But, you know, it's nice to know that Ferndale has a great reputation, and the people in our bus garage are really making strides, not just for our kids, but for kids outside of our district so they can get there too.
All right, so with that, public comment is closed, and we'll turn to the only item on the agenda for business at this special meeting, and I'll ask Mr. Pruitt to introduce it.
Yes, there's a resolution authorizing administration to seek proposals for custodial and facility maintenance services. I'm going to ask Mr. Tom Shelton a short description of what this is and this process is.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Evening.
The resolution that's in front of you this evening is a resolution to solicit bids for custodial and/or maintenance services. That's a very important distinction, that the resolution, or that the actual bid, the RFP that will go out will specify those two as separate services. So in the end of the process, you as the board will have the decision to contract all of those services, to contract some of those services, or to contract none of those services. So what's in front of you tonight is really just the beginning of this process, and really just a statement that you would like to look at some bids for these services. There's really two critical considerations that I wanted to briefly address with you as you consider this. One is the question of why you should consider reviewing bids. And the second is to give you some idea of what to expect in terms of a timeline and resolution to this. The primary reason why we feel the board should consider looking at an RFP is financial. There are budget projections out there with looking at as much of a $2.5 million budget gap in the next school year. Our per pupil funding and our enrollment don't look any more promising for next year than they do this year. And looking at some of our most recent comparative data that we can find, we see that Ferndale spent almost 12% of its total budget on operations and maintenance in the 2012-2013 school year. Only 2 other school districts in Oakland County spent a higher percentage of their budget on those services. At the same time, Ferndale only spent 50% of its total budget on instruction in those years. And to give you a way of comparison, most districts in Oakland County spent between 60 and 70% of their budget on instruction. Only one other district spending less than us on classroom instruction. So we feel pretty strongly that that's an important issue we need to address in terms of instructional spending versus operational spending. Another issue that has to be taken into consideration is quality. In November and December of this year, we had an independent third party that came into the district, looked at our facilities, and really what they came to us with is that we're paying for a pretty average level of cleanliness in our buildings, but there were a lot of issues that they uncovered in terms of cleanliness in the building and safety issues. So we feel that the end result of both of those issues, both the financial and the quality, is that we really could see some significant cost savings, not just for the coming school year, but in the long term, by at least looking at what a third-party vendor could do for us for custodial and/or maintenance services. If the board were to choose to issue an RFP tonight, I would work with the law firm of Clark Hill to get an RFP issued by the end of this week. Towards the end of next week, looking at tentatively February 20th, we would do a pre-bid meeting where we would walk the vendors through some of our facilities in the district and answer questions. Bids would be due on Monday, March 9th. Again, kind of projecting out and assuming that what the board would decide to do that tonight. We'd go through an analysis period, we would visit sites, we would do interviews with the vendors, and the ultimate goal would be to get a recommendation to the board by April 20th for a July 1st implementation. So it's kind of a long process that we're going on. We're very fortunate that Clark Hill, who we would be working with, has worked with most of the districts in Oakland County as they've looked at this. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question in terms of process.
Yes.
The April meeting?
Yes.
What was the date again?
I think I looked at April 20th is
Okay.
the regular board meeting in April.
And so would it be a situation where the information would be presented to us that night and then we would need to decide that night? Or would there be
I think
a
we could
work
have,
session?
I would
option?
assume we need 60 to 90 days between approval of the contract and implementation. So the goal needs to be for an approval on that April 20th date. So we may need to have some discussions about, a study session meeting or a meeting
Okay.
prior to that. to
So a
present
study
the
session
recommendations.
ahead of that meeting would be appropriate?
I would assume
I mean, or is there a bid opening process that only can happen on a certain day or?
The bids are due on March 9th, and
Mhm.
for the 2 weeks following that, we'll go through a process of analyzing those bids. Ideally, by the end of March, we'll select 2 or 3 bidders that we want to look at further. We'll do interviews and site visits, present that information to the board, both in terms of the financials they submitted as well as the interviews and the site visits.
Okay.
Yes,
Karen?
Can you speak to what types of entities would be welcome to put in bids for this RFP process?
What types of entities? So these are private companies. These are companies that, there's several of them across the state and across the country that bid on these. There's several that are pretty well-known and pretty common across the county that I'm aware of. It's important to note, and I don't know if this speaks to your question, Karen, or maybe I need some more clarification. the workers that we get in through the third-party vendors actually go through the same process that our district employees go through, where they're fingerprinted, there's a background check and those things. So they're not total strangers coming into our buildings. There's a
So-
background checking process.
I think I'm trying to ask what role our current union would be allowed to have.
So legally, the current union has the right to bid on the services just as any other organization would. So the ASME organization could put forth a bid to provide the services.
And so by hurrying the timeline here in our notification, we're giving more time to prepare for that March 9th deadline.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. In terms of the specifications of the RFP, one of the things that I've responded to many RFPs, or been on the team that responded to many RFPs for my organization, which provides substance abuse treatment work for departments of corrections around the country. And often there are very rigorous performance standards that are specified in the RFP. There are standards for employee turnover, often penalties or rewards for either high or low turnover, as the case may be, and specifications on pay and benefits. And I did review some of this with Mr. Pruitt a few days ago, but would those sorts of specifications be in the RFP?
A lot of the specifications that you just mentioned are already going to be in the RFP based on my discussions with Clark Hill. If there were others that we have not, that are not in there, we could certainly put them in there if there were considerations that were important to the board.
All right. And then just in terms of the due diligence with respect to, as we're working on preparing our budget for next year now, does the administration view this as an essential part of gathering information to put the budget together, to present recommendations to the board?
I do. I think, and I'll let Mr. Pruitt speak to that as well, but I feel like as we look at our budget for next year, we really are trying to leave no stone unturned in terms of our options for next year and what we need to do to present a balanced budget.
As presented earlier in the year with the possible upwards to $2.5 million, 1.6 being based upon the DLC, 700,000 based upon the current negotiated amount that we need to pay to the different unions, as well as new bus leases, new instructional materials and textbooks. That's upwards to 2.5. Based upon our current budget right now, there is nowhere to get that 2.5. So to be able to look at every possible option, I know that it was mentioned earlier in the public comment regarding a slippery slope. And I know I've made this comment to individuals, I make it publicly. We have benchmarked all our different areas. We have benchmarked transportation. There is no substantial savings in transportation in any way, shape, or form. Hence why we need to look at also leasing buses for next year in order to refresh our fleet. So we have so many buses that are of old age, and we have no money in the budget in order to refresh those leases so that our bus drivers have good buses in order to drive. And as presented in the last couple months, our custodial costs comparatively in the county and for our size of district are much higher, an average of $400 to $500 per student higher than the average within the county. So that's the greatest area of need right now, and to know what we can budget for so we don't have to come back and have a negative budget, or because we only have $2 million in our fund equity, eventually go into a deficit, which is the area we want to keep the district from.
And, yeah. And Raylan had a question too. I don't know who was first.
My question for you Shelton is, should this RFP, the proposal, request the proposals go through tonight, would the board have the opportunity to look at the RFPs shortly after the March 9th? I mean, not waiting until April, just would we have access to see the proposals?
Yes,
Very
yes,
soon?
yes, yes. We will, I'll work with Mr. Pruitt to come up with a process for that part of that stage of the process where we'll be reviewing the bids that come in, talking about doing site visits. I'll work with Mr. Pruitt to discuss the right way to involve the board in that.
And my understanding is it would have to be a public bid opening in any event, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Nan, go ahead.
It is my understanding that when we put out a bid for an RFP like this, it is one of the boxes, like the 7 of 9, that checks off so that way we get the best practices money every year. So if we put out this sort of RFP, then we'll be checking off that box to hopefully get the $50 per people for next year. No
Yes.
matter if we don't act on the RFPs, just by calling it, we get to check off that box.
I believe that the best practices language is about soliciting the bids, not necessarily accepting them.
Correct.
That's what I remember you saying, so, yes.
And then the period of time between March 9th and the beginning of April, I think I remember seeing on the timeline, is just is a period of analyzing the bids, because we're not going to automatically take the low bidder.
That's correct. That's correct. It's
So we
a
have
pretty,
to analyze the quality of their bid, and then site visits would be involved.
yes, as well as interviews. So we'll bring them in and interview them. Anything in their bid or in their application that we have concerns about, we have the opportunity through that interview process to raise with them as well.
All right. And then, well, that was all I had.
I have another one. If, Jim was talking about if there are certain parts of an RFP that we would want to include, certain requirements. Is that, if there's something that we have that we would like to include in that, do we need to include that in the resolution tonight? Or is that something that can be done?
That's something that can be done by giving your feedback to Jim, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. Or Blake.
Yeah, I think we could discuss that in the deliberation once the motion is made, whether we wanted to amend it or just advise the superintendent.
I mean, I imagine the RFP itself is complicated or
It's very
lengthy.
complicated.
I mean,
It is very
there's a lot to include in it.
There's really two sections to it. The first section is the scope of services and a lot of the legal terms of it. The second piece is a series of attachments that I'll work with them on, information about our districts, age of our buildings, how we have our employees shifted right now. So it's really those two parts.
And one other thing, I guess, when we put out an RFP, there are companies that are going to respond to it, and these are companies that are accustomed to this process.
Yes.
They will be accustomed to the possibility that we will not, that we might opt out.
Absolutely.
And so we will not be under any pressure from the people who submit any kind of bids to go through with it at the time. I mean, they will know that there's a possibility we'll say, no, we don't want to.
They will know that there will be multiple bidders, so the board could decide to go with any of the bidders, and they will know that the board has the right up until that April 20th meeting to decide, hey, we're not doing this, we're going to stop.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
Am I to understand that this RFP is one option out of other solutions? This is not set in stone that we would go this way?
It's not set in stone that we would go this way, no. This is, excuse me. This is stating a desire to look at pricing and nothing more than that. The board at the end of the process can decide that the prices were too high, or we don't want to take this move and we want to cut the budget in other areas, in which case there's no commitment or nothing lost.
So it's a process to uncover options.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
All right. I think it's time for a motion, and I will offer, I move the adoption of the following resolution, and I will read it. Whereas the Board of Education recognizes non-instructional support services staff as providing important school district functions, and whereas the state funding system for K through 12 public education has failed to keep up with the actual cost of providing these non-instructional services and educating the students in the school district, and whereas based on the state's failure to allow our revenues to keep pace with inflation, the budget deficit projections will require the school district to make substantial cuts in educational programs and various non-instructional support services. And whereas in spite of the importance of the non-instructional support service functions, the Board of Education must divert as little funding from the educational programs as possible while accomplishing their intended purposes. And whereas the Board of Education feels that it is both prudent and fiscally responsible to investigate the school district's cost associated with non-instructional support services and investigate financial data on potential cost savings from outsourcing certain non-instructional support services. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby instructs the school district's administration to conduct a comprehensive investigation of how to provide the current level, mix, and quality of the custodial and facility maintenance services functions through the most cost-efficient delivery system available, including the issuance of requests for proposals to seek proposals from third-party contracting firms. And two, the Board of Education directs the administration to be prepared to present and discuss their findings with the board no later than the April 20th, 2015 Board of Education meeting. So is there a second for that motion to adopt the resolution?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Butters. Discussion on the motion?
So I just have a comment about development of the RFP. I think it's a careful balance that we have to have between making sure that RFP is written in a way that is descriptive and transparent enough in what it is that we're looking for, so that people aren't answering to some unspoken goals, and also making sure that it's not so prescriptive that certain entities would be locked out of it. And so I just want to make sure that it doesn't go into the category of exclusive, that it's transparent in what we're looking for, but doesn't become exclusive to certain parties.
So that you end up having, say, one qualified bidder.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important. And part of that would be the clear, when I was speaking about the clear performance standards, that would be, that's talking about the quality and mix of the services. So we have to, I think that's important to be as clear on that as possible. And, I think the report received from the CCS, from the firm called CCS was, part of what needs to go into that. So that wouldn't be a problem to do, to put, to make sure those specifications are. Would you be able to, what's the process of posting the RFP? It goes to a shared, there's a shared site, I'm sure.
There's a shared site out there. There are
State
also
level.
vendors that Clark Hill, who we would work with, has worked with extensively, so they know who the companies are that are bidding on these, and they will get them to them. There will also, we will make sure that both the board president and the superintendent, as well as the association, have a copy of the RFP before it's actually issued.
Okay.
Sorry, could you remind me again when that RFP would go out?
It would be probably towards the end of this week, probably Thursday or Friday this week, just because it's fairly complex to put together.
And just to clarify, I mean, I think it's clear to us because we're up here and we're looking at CCS standards, but there's nothing about including those that would exclude any of the groups and entities we've talked about, including the union.
No, no.
Okay. Any other deliberation or questions on the motion to adopt the resolution?
I guess my main request that we include a point in the RFP has to, but I'm not sure of the appropriate wording, but I think we have I think that it's important that we include some sort of statement about who gets hired. We had a conversation about that could be something that we include in terms of related to current employees.
And Mr. Sheldon, you can, many districts, if they decide to go this route, do retain many of their current employees, and that's something that can be put within the RFP.
Yes, it actually is fairly standard in those RFPs, and we can
Okay.
absolutely make sure it's in there.
Okay, so I just want to make that formal request that we make sure that that's in there.
Duly noted.
And then also, just to piggyback on some of that, I know that there was large concern about issues such as control of our own supplies and such, and those are types of things that we could see in the vetting process of the RFPs, is how much control we would have over sort of our capital goods. Right?
Absolutely. And that, again, is determined by how the RFP goes out, and we have the option of saying we want them to provide chemicals versus us providing them. I believe, and we can always change it as we get on the road, I believe we would be looking at having them provide the chemicals and being responsible for that. But that would be something that we could talk about and amend as we go.
Would the wage parameters be part of the RFP, or would that, because I know that districts in outsourcing or other entities that look at issuing RFPs have control over certain parts of the wage and benefits
I'll be
structure?
honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Just to clarify
Yes,
at a later time. And then the other thing that often my organization has to deal with is fairly strict rules about employee stability. So often in an RFP, we have to specify what we're going to do as an organization on the HR end to make sure that employees are, recruited and retained. Mm-hmm. And part of that also part of that is, of course, offering positions when a contract changes over. But the other part of that is, I had mentioned penalties or basic, either penalties or rewards, depending on the issue for, decreasing employee turnover or enhancing employee stability, and absenteeism also. So
That's definitely something I can pursue and make sure it's represented somehow in the RFP.
See what Clark Hill has on that.
Yep.
And I also have one more comment. Did I hear you correctly in saying that AFSCME could also go out for the RFP?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, now, should that RFP not be accepted, what would happen to, say, our custodians or maintenance personnel that are affected by this and perhaps would like to retire at the end of the year?
So let me make sure I understand your question correctly. Your question is if the RFP were to, if the bids were to not be accepted and the board would decide not to enter a contract, what would happen to those employees who wanted to retire at the end of the year? Those who are eligible to retire would be eligible to retire, obviously. And and obviously, if the decision was that we weren't going to outsource, that we would have to look at how we can make things work with our existing staff.
I think one of the benefits we have is that being one of the later districts, we're able to really ask the delving questions. I'm in a building that's been outsourced. I know a whole lot of things that didn't go well, and I talked to a lot of school board members from a lot of other districts where things didn't go well. So I hope that we'll have our eyes wide open to some of those challenges ahead of time. And we have read things like the Greenwood study and have advantage in that foresight where people who were at the beginning of the movement may not have had that. So
when I spoke with my contact at Clark Hill, one of the things he shared with me is that the RFPs that they're actually putting out are a lot tighter now than they were even 3 or 4 years ago, and really account for a lot of the challenges and a lot of the issues that some districts had when they originally went down this road.
All right. Yes.
One more thing, just sort of piggybacking on what Karen said, I think I want to just thank everyone that did speak tonight and thank everyone for coming out. And I know that I am going to be thinking about all the different parts that are involved in this process. This is the beginning of a process, and we're all going to be thinking a lot about all these issues. I feel that we as a board are put into a very difficult situation where there's a responsibility we have to look over the financial situation of our district, and this is going to be just part of that process. But it's also a community, and I definitely agree that that's going to be something that we include in our thinking about what we end up doing. And I just wanted to make that point.
I actually wanted to second that and also say that for me, it's really important that the union keeps on being involved in these conversations and that they are really offered a fair chance to also enter an RFP, and that we keep that in mind as a board as we're discussing this, all the things that were spoken tonight.
This is certainly not a foregone conclusion. There is no decision that has already been made at the table. And a lot of the comments that people made tonight really resonated, especially on the issues of trust. I think that sometimes we make decisions, but without verbalizing why those decisions were made, to hurry on having the meeting so that we give maximum amount of time to the process. I can see how that would erode at trust. And so the things you said tonight, I really took to heart, and we're listening.
All right. So I think we're ready to move to a vote. So roll call, please. Ms. Shepherd?
Butters?
Yes.
Yes. Mueller? Yes. Lataj?
Yes.
Lee May? Yes. Toomey?
Yes.
President O'Donnell?
Yes. With 7 yes and 0 no, the motion passes and the resolution is adopted. And with that, the special meeting is adjourned at 7:09.